Hi, I'm Chuck Morris. Happy to be with you here today for this online class for the Figge Art Museum. We're going to do a portrait in pencil today, but we're going to do a new approach, something that we probably haven't tried before and possibly something that no one's tried before. We're going to use an app that I made called Shake the Muse, and on this app you can shake your phone and something will come up at random with different elements of art to use in your new work of art. So I've created a special Shake the Muse version just for portraits today, and just for portrait drawings in fact. And we'll take a look at that in a bit. But if you ever want to use the Shake the Muse app, you will find that there are actually 20 billion different ideas. Every time you shake your phone, you get a new set of art elements to bring together in a new work of art. And there are actually 20 billion different possible combinations. So it's like having ideas for 20 billion different art styles. Now with the version that I made for portrait drawing, it's actually 190,000 different possible ways of doing a portrait drawing. So you can do whatever comes up on Shake the Muse, or you can make your own selections of art elements, and I'll explain all those art elements in just a bit here. But you can make your own choices if you like, or take inspiration from the muse. So let's get started. So this is the special page that I set up on shakethemuse.com. You can find it at shakethemuse.com/portraits1, all lowercase, portraits1. And on this page you'll see that you will get different art elements to bring together in a new portrait. Let me show you how that works. So you can either shake your phone when you have that page open on your phone or tablet, or you can tap here on Shake the Muse and something random is going to come up to give you an idea for a new kind of portrait. So the way of seeing that I am going to do with this portrait is expressive representation, which means it's going to have strokes that show the action of my pencil. Since we're going to use pencil on this, it'll be pencil instead of paint strokes, but they could be all kinds of different types of strokes. They could be little dots or short strokes or long loopy strokes or zigzaggy strokes, whatever goes with the sort of emotion that I want to express. And the distortion of form would be haphazard distortion, which means that, you know, like this guy's jaw and cheek are kind of dented in and his ears are stuck up in weird ways and eyebrows oddly raised. And so haphazard distortion is the way I would distort the form of the person that I'm drawing. And the indication of form would be values as flat shapes. So the darks are all going to be one dark value like this dark blue here, and the medium shadows are going to be like this lighter blue, and then the highlights would be maybe just white, and then we might have a little shadow, light shadow color, but all of those would be individually flat shapes with not much variation within those flat shapes. So that's the kind of indication of form I would use. And where one object meets another, the edges will be hard edges. It'll be abrupt. You know, if I've got something light against something dark, it's just going to go light, and then right where that edge is, it's going to change over to dark with no blurring. So hard edges and dark values for the lightness, darkness. So mostly dark values. And the emotional tone would be sad and mournful. So let me go through and show you all the different possibilities here, because you can make your own choices if you like. So if you shake again and realism representation comes up, you won't have indication of form down here, because the indication of form is going to be realistic, right? So you're going to really show the way the forms are and the way forms turn. So indication of form won't be there, but you could have distortion of form. Like this is a sort of idealized representational portrait, right? And then the edges could be all kinds of different edges. Uh, Let me go through the edges real quick. Why not? So you see here soft outlines that kind of blur, these outlines blur. If you wanted to choose this because you feel like it matches, uh, if you're doing a self-portrait, if it says something about you, or if you're doing a portrait of someone else, then maybe it says something about them to have soft outlines. Or you can have undulating outlines, which means they get thinner and thicker as they go, as they move. So that's undulating outlines. Or you could have thick outlines for the edges. So in between shapes, you would have just big, bold strokes or thick outlines. You could have hard outlines, which are just pretty much consistent outlines on the edge of your portrait. You could have partial outlines, where you have outlines just sort of as accents. You're not outlining the entire portrait, but just parts of it. You could have erratic edges, where it's broken up. The edges are kind of messy. You don't really see a clean edge. It's just kind of a messy edge. You could have haloed edges, where a light value, something light, is emanating from the person that you're drawing. Or you could have dark values if you felt like that kind of halo matched either what that person is feeling, the person you're drawing, or what you're feeling if you're doing a self-portrait. Again, you could have hard edges where one value is meeting another. It just abruptly changes from that darker value to the lighter value. You could have softened edges where there's a little bit of a blur where these meet. So you see how there's a little blur there. So it doesn't go abruptly from the light value to the dark value, but there's a little transition in value. And those edges could be varied from hard to soft. So in some places, you have a hard edge where it's an abrupt change, and then in other places you have it blurred. So you have some soft and some hard and everything in between. Now, some of the edges can actually get lost in the background. So if you have a dark background and dark clothing, you might not even be able to tell where the clothing is anymore, because it just kind of melts into the background because you are losing those edges. You can have a wide blur where it transitions, from the dark value to the light value in a big wide blur. So it goes dark to a little lighter, to a little lighter, to a little lighter, until you get to that lighter value of the other object. And then back to soft outlines. And of course, in lightness, darkness, you have a whole range of possibilities here. Let's start with light values. So most of the values can be light, hardly any medium or dark values, just a very light scene, or in the case of a portrait, you just keep everything looking light. You can have light and medium values where you really don't have dark values in there, nothing really dark. Or you can have mostly medium values, nothing too dark and nothing too light. You can have mostly medium and dark values, and you're really kind of not doing the light values. Or you can have all or mostly dark values. So you see how these choices of light values, dark values, medium values, they might help to create the mood of the portrait that you're making. So you want to think about those things ahead of time and make those choices. If you're making the choices yourself, or if you're just shaking the muse and letting the muse suggest to you what you're going to do, you can do it that way. But these are choices that artists make to create different moods. You can have full value range, which means you have your lights, you have your darks, and you have a full range of medium values. You can have high contrast, where really it's mostly light values and dark values, and not so much medium values. Or you can have really just black and white, so it's stark black against white with nothing in between. And emotional tone, there's a whole range here, of course, and it's pretty simple. Of course, you can have happy and joyous, calm and contented, serious and solemn, superior and self-righteous, cool and distant, dull and weak, sad and mournful, shy and uncertain, fearful and anxious, hostile and angry, sarcastic and edgy, sort of comical, passionate and manic, and back to happy and joyous. So you can make a choice of the emotional tone that you want to express in the portrait that you're doing. And, mostly you'll get that with the expression on the face of the person that you're drawing. And you just keep in mind trying to capture that emotion as you're drawing them, and try and keep your subject expressing that emotion. So, if someone's sitting for you for a portrait, their expression might change over time, and you'll have to ask them to return to the emotion that you would like for them to express. Or if you're doing a self-portrait, if you want to project a certain emotion, you're going to need to, if you're looking in a mirror, you're going to need to keep going back to expressing that emotion in your face and then trying to capture that. So as far as distortion of form goes, you can have idealized, where you're making it, you're trying to capture, well, you're going to make things look more beautiful, what you consider beautiful, whatever that might be. So maybe it's smoother skin, or big eyes, or whatever you feel like is beautiful. You would push it to look more like that. You would take your subject that you're looking at and make them be a little more idealized, a little more like what you think is beautiful. You can simplify forms, so you're not showing all of the details within a form. You just can make it, a cheek can just be kind of rounded and not have all of the wrinkles in it, or something like that. Or you can make a portrait a caricature, where if somebody has a small nose, you make it very small. If they have a big chin, you make it very big. And if they have big eyebrows, you make them super big eyebrows. That's caricature. You can have haphazard distortion, where the forms of the person's face just go in all kind of weird directions, and unnatural distortion. Or things can be disjointed and kind of broken apart. Parts of the face might appear where they shouldn't be. And you could have the whole face kind of broken up into planes in a sort of cubist style. You could have missing forms where maybe you don't show a nose, or you don't show a mouth, or you don't show the eyes. In this case, you're not really showing the person's body. You can have repeated forms where somebody might have multiple arms and multiple faces. Or you can have a sort of ghost image repeated behind a person showing movement. You can elongate and stretch out a character when you're doing a portrait, make it look elongated. Or you can go angular and use rectangles and triangles and sharp angles to distort the form of the person that you're drawing. You can also round everything, make everything a little more rounded than is natural. That's another way to distort form. And again, back to idealized. So let's look at the different ways of seeing real quick. So we've got realism and representation, which means you're drawing forms as they are, except you might distort the form, but you're still kind of making it look like a real object, okay? You can have expressive representation where, again, you're using marks to express action and emotion. So there's a whole range of different marks that you can make with hatching and swirly strokes and jagged strokes and jabbing strokes. So expressive representation. You can also do abstract representation, where it becomes more about shape and flattening of shape maybe. So it can be an abstracted portrait. So let's shake the muse again and see what comes up. And now we've got abstract representation. So here we're going to get another option for indication of form, where you didn't have indication of form with realism because that was all going to be making it look like real objects, right? Now in abstract representation, we can play around with the indication of form. And we can have values as flat shapes, where you have the darks being all one value and the lights being all one value, and just use just a few little values, a few values to indicate all of the different shapes and forms. You can do flat shapes for each object. So a nose could be a flat shape, and an eye can be a flat shape, and a cheek can be a flat shape. You can do minimal shading. You might have just a skin tone that you put over the whole portrait, and then you do little shadows, really subtle little shadows, and that's just minimal shading, but you can indicate form that way. You can be fully rendered from light to shadows. You see the shadows and all the transitions from the darks to the lighter, to the lightest, to the highlights, subtle transitions throughout, fully rendering from light to shadow. You can do small planes, and this is a portrait that my wife Rose did of me, where she's using brushstrokes as little planes that all come together to create my likeness. Or you can do medium-sized planes, where you're doing a plane for sort of simplifying the different planes of the face into medium-sized sections and indicating the form that way. Or you could do large planes and break up the head into really big shapes. So you're really simplifying the form and breaking it up into large flat planes. And back to values as flat shapes. So, okay, we're going to shake the muse one more time, and whatever comes up here, I am going to do as a portrait, and you can shake the muse for yourself, and see what comes up, and you can do a portrait based on whatever comes up, or you can make your own choices. It's up to you. All right, but here I'm going to shake the muse and see what comes up, and I will do a portrait based on that. So I am going to do abstract representation with haphazard distortion, minimal shading, and softened edges, medium values, and a happy and joyous emotional tone. All right, I am going to get to work on that, and you work on your portrait, and I will let you see what I'm drawing as I go. All right, here goes. All right, since I'm doing medium values, I'm going to just shade in really quickly and get something down so I'm avoiding having light values. So I'm committing myself to having at least this dark of values, and then I'll go a little darker than this. So I won't speak now, and I'll just speed this part up because this is not so interesting. Alright, so I've committed to going at least that dark because I'm doing medium values. I don't want any light values in there. So everything I do is going to get darker than that. So I think I'm doing a sort of self-portrait, but because it has haphazard distortion, might look somewhat like me, it might not, but we'll see what happens here. So I will just start off loosely sketching in. I've got softened edges, so I'm not going to do any hard lines for the portrait here. So I'm indicating the top of my bald head here. I think I'll make it darker behind my bald head up here. And I think what I'll do to start this off is just do some minimal shading to figure out where I'm going to place the eyes and the nose and all the features of the face and the hair. And it might not be too apparent to you to begin with where everything's going, but it'll start to take shape, I believe. I believe you'll see it start to take shape. And again, for this style, I'm doing minimal shading, so I'm not going to have it's going to be kind of a flattened face with a little bit of shading on the sides. That's the idea with minimal shading. So I want to even up a little bit of the texture within the face here. When I did the rough shading in of the entire square here, it's not as clean as I'd like it to be. So I'm going to go back in. I'm just hitting the lighter spots real quick, and I can come back in here also with an eraser and take away some of the darker spots that I don't need. And I'll do that in a little bit. Since we're doing haphazard distortion, I'm going to make the nose kind of crooked. I have a crooked nose, but I'm going to make it even more crooked. And I think I'll have my eyebrows kind of arching up a little bit there. And I should figure out, I think I'm going to make the eyes go in a weird way right up in here for the haphazard distortion. And my eyes kind of go up toward the nose, which might add to this is meant to have a happy and joyous emotional tone to it. So I'm hoping it adds to that emotional tone too. We'll see here. But I gotta definitely do a big smile on here. So here's the shading underneath my mustache. And I think I'll have a kind of open mouth, goofy smile. So you see that I'm not doing any hard edges here. And I'm using, the pencil has a kind of edge that from all the rubbing, it has a flattened edge, which allows me to do little circles and not do any hard lines. Now if I need to get in there, I can just rotate my pencil and there's still kind of a sharp edge on there. I can rotate my pencil and hit little spots that I need to make a little darker. And then I can rotate back to where the flattened edge is and keep going with doing these little circles for the shading. Figure out where I'm placing my mouth here. So I've got a little bit of, gotta figure out if I want to have a darker background behind my beard here. I think that would be a good idea. So I'll make it darker out this way. You see that I'm kind of refining the shading as I go, and I'm hitting the lighter spots so it's has less erratic texture to it. Now I can already see there's a couple spots are a little too dark for parts of the faces, and I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I can pinch this and get the shape that I want to go in here and just lighten up some of these dark spots that I don't need, and just dab the kneaded eraser on there to lighten that up. And a neat little trick with the kneaded eraser is that it gets lead on the tip, it gets graphite I should say on the tip, and you can, once you have graphite on the tip, then you're not going to take up as much graphite. if you have a clean tip, you're going to take up more. So if you see some spots that just need to be a little bit lightened, you can go and hit those and not take up too much. And then you can again roll your kneaded eraser, get a tip on it, and the ones you need to lighten up even more, now you got a clean tip, it'll take up more. Got to be careful, I don't want to get too light because I'm supposed to keep all medium values. I want to go darker from my initial shading. But there are just a couple of spots that I don't like to have in here because of the texture that they give. I want to clean up the texture. All right, let's see. I think I'll have my hair kind of come out in a goofy way for the haphazard distortion of form. I'm going to have some crazy hair coming way out. And I'm letting these lines here show that hair. And I'll come back and accentuate that a little more, but I want to kind of get all the basic shapes of the face in. Get everything placed here. Okay, I have to be careful not to get too hard edged with anything, because this is supposed to be all kind of softened edges. So I'm just hitting these light spots here. Refining the shading as I go. So I think I want the side of my forehead here to get a little darker as it goes back. Again, that's minimal shading. But as it comes to where it meets the hair, you need to make it a little darker to set that off from the hair. So I'll have to can lighten up a few things here. But I want to mostly push things a little darker to do all the drawing, so we stay in the medium value range. I'm going to show my ear here a little bit, but I want it to kind of be overlapped by this crazy hair coming out here. So I think I'll have my chin go out a little big, and I think I'll have the face kind of curving around this way for the haphazard distortion. And I'm doing little circles, so I'm not doing a sharp edge anywhere. So I rotate my pencil to be able to get these little spots that I want to hit, and eventually I'll have to sharpen my pencil, but if I don't want to take time to sharpen my pencil, I can just rotate it and get that sharper edge to get in there and hit these little light spots and fix up that texture in there. And some of it's just a little too light for me, so I'm going to come back with it's a little too dark for me, so I'm going to come back with my kneaded eraser and just hit those little spots that I don't want there. Shading here down just a bit further. I want a little bit more room to draw here. Now you saw when I was shading, I was using the side of my pencil here, kind of flattening the pencil this way and getting a bigger edge for doing the rough shading. So I want to be consistent with that as I extend the shading downward. And what I was doing is I was shading diagonally in one direction and then diagonally in the other direction, and then doing circular shading. So I'm doing diagonal one direction, diagonal the other direction. And some circles. So what I'm doing, I'm deciding now that the light on my face here is coming pretty much from the front and a little bit from this side. So this side is going to get a little darker, and this side over here will be lit a little more. But as the forehead is going back here, it needs to be a little darker. And I might want to raise up the top of the forehead just slightly here. I'll look at that. I think I do. So let's have some crazy hair on this side. Maybe I'll make it so you can't even tell where the hair ends. Maybe it just keeps going out there. And I think I'll make the ear kind of big on this side for the distortion of form. So I'm going to have to get some slightly darker values in here. Still, I'm not going very dark because it's all meant to be medium values. So kind of looks like I'm in a hazy, dimly lit space here. I'm just looking in my phone's camera as a mirror. Texture here a little bit, hitting these light spots. I want to lighten up this side of the nose a little bit. Some of those dark spots are a little too much. And we'll have a little more texture in the mustache, so you can, some lines go in there, so you get the feeling that it's but we don't want to get too hard edge, because that's going to take away from this hazy feeling. So got to be careful about that. So this is one of 190,000 different ways that you can do a portrait using Shake the Muse. And what's interesting is that even with this set of elements, with abstract representation, haphazard distortion of form, minimal shading, softened edges, medium values, and a happy, joyous tone, even if you took all of those elements, you would do something completely different, because you're you and I'm me, and we all have our different ways of doing things. And as I'm going here, I'm making countless little choices about what kind of shading I want, what kind of haphazard distortion I want, what does a happy, joyous feeling mean to me? And the way you would do a portrait using these elements, and the way any artist would do a portrait using these specific elements, it would be totally different. And that's what's amazing. The possibilities with art are really endless. But we can take all the elements of visual language and play with them however we like. It's just good to know all of the different parts of visual language, so we can use them as we choose. So you can go to shakethemuse.com at any time, and I've written a little about the use of each one of the elements of art. And if you have ideas about your uses of those elements, and you want to send me your thoughts, you can do that. Just email info@shakethemuse.com, and I'll get that. And you can certainly send me images of your portraits or paintings that you do using Shake the Muse. Eventually I'll start putting some work done by different artists using Shake the Muse. I think I'm going to need to sharpen my pencil a little bit. It's getting a little too worn down there. So after I sharpen my pencil with my electric pencil sharpener, I wipe it off on Kleenex, so any of the loose parts come off there. So otherwise they'll just fall onto your drawing and get in the way. Even the paint from the outside of the pencil will fall onto your drawing and get in the way. So right now, since the pencil is very sharp, I'm just going in and refining the texture, hitting these little spots here. Some of them, again, I need to go back with the kneaded eraser and lighten some spots up a little bit. But with shading, you can just keep going as much as you want, refining the shading, making it smoother and smoother. So I might, when I'm doing an illustration, I don't know if any of you saw my show at the Figge Art Museum, the storytelling tree, those illustrations. That shading, I would go back and refine the shading over and over. So this is maybe my second pass right now at refining the shading. When I do illustrations, when I did those illustrations for the storytelling tree, I would go back 3 or 4 or 5 times to refine that shading. And mostly it was done with pencil and not with erasing, but you can do it both ways. Go back and forth with erasing darker dots that you don't want, or going and hitting the light spots to smooth the texture. Some of this nose has just got dark spots that gotta go. And be careful not to touch the surface of your paper. Like, it's best not to use your fingers to smear things around, because you get oil on your fingers onto the paper, and then when you go to do the shading, the oil interacts with the graphite in weird ways, and it makes it harder to control what you're doing. And you're not really sure where you have oil down, and then it just makes things unpredictable. So I try and keep, put something on the edge of my palm to definitely make sure I'm not hitting the paper, and I keep my hand elevated so I don't touch the paper. Sometimes I even have a sort of frame elevated. I'll show you. I use this stuff. It's thick foam core, and I'll rest my hand like this so I can get right in there. But with a sort of foam core mat around the drawing that's up above the drawing, then I can just leave this on here. I don't have to hold it up. So this doesn't look entirely like me, but that's part of the idea with haphazard distortion, is that it's not going to be exactly like the person. It's going to be a little weird. But I'm trying to get some of my features in there. So even when you're doing minimal shading, if you're doing a pencil drawing, you're actually doing a lot of shading, because all of the parts that are in the middle, that are all pretty much the same value, you still have to refine that shading, unless you're going to have just a white, just let the paper show and then just do shading around the edges. If you have any value to the middle of the face, then you're doing shading throughout, even though it appears to be minimal shading. Still a lot of work doing all the shading, right? So I need to give a little more rounding of this cheek right here. Definitely need to give some more value to the mouth, a little more darkness under here, shadow under the mustache. But I'm not getting really dark because we're sticking with medium values. And you see that I'm not doing any hard edges here, doing little circle rubbing. So nothing gets too hard edged. And again, I'm rotating my pencil to get a sharper edge, get these little light spots here. I think I won't talk for a while so we can speed the video up. I'm just going to do a bunch of shading work. So something I like about this approach with these particular elements is that you can get the feeling that this guy is kind of, I don't know how to say it, just melding into becoming a part of the atmosphere that he's in. Can't express it much better than that, but it kind of feels like he's part of, because the edges are blurred and everything's kind of softened. He just kind of flows right into the background, into the atmosphere around him, which kind of goes nicely with the happy, joyous feeling. He's just enjoying being a part of it all. So making a little choice here where I'm not taking the shoulders all the way out, and that also is to me is adding to the feeling of him being a part of this atmosphere. You know, I kind of like the drawing as it is right now. I mean, there's a couple little things I could do, but I'm enjoying the feeling of it. Well, I might work on this some more, but you know, because this is not meant to be a really long video, I think I'm going to stop here and let that be what it is. Well, sorry. A couple little things I need to do. Clean up that edge just a little bit for the ear. Just want to give a little more volume to his beard here. A little shadow underneath on the shirt. By the way, I'm doing all of this drawing with a 2B pencil, which is sort of on the soft side of pencils, and softer pencils are darker. So H pencils are hard, B pencils are soft. And the larger the number of B pencil, like it's 2B, that's pretty soft. 3B is softer and darker. 4B is softer and darker still, all the way up to 8B, which is the softest and darkest. And then H goes the other direction. So H is pretty hard, and 2H is harder and lighter. And 3H is harder and lighter still all the way. You can even get a 10H pencil, which is really hard and hardly makes a mark. It's hard to find 10Hs. Usually they go to 7 or 8. So I'm erasing right here, so it feels like his shoulder is just kind of going up into the background there. So if I were to get more refined anywhere on this drawing, if I got more refined with the shading, I would have to get more refined everywhere. So there's a certain roughness to the drawing, a certain texture that's fairly consistent throughout. There are a few rougher patches here and there, but I kind of like them because they let his hair just kind of disappear into this rougher texture up here. So you're not sure where his head ends, where his hair ends. But if I were to get really refined with the texture anywhere, then I would need to refine all over the place. But I like this sort of resolution of texture here, and I think that's about it. Actually, that was a mistake to fill in those little dots. All right, let's call that done. I hope you had fun with this class today. I really enjoyed it. I'd like to thank Global Partners Alliance LLC for sponsoring this class. We're excited to have you join us in reminiscing and celebrating our 15 days of Figge that will include a hand-blown glass demonstration at Hot Glass, online tour of the John Deere art collection, a Caribbean cooking class, and much more. You can bid on one of our fabulous online auction items. There are artworks by Ellen Wagner, Tim Schiffer, Rob Lipnick, George Olson, Didier William, and more. You can also bid on a membership to the Outing Club, a party at Up, a virtual wine and art class. Bidding is easy, and it's a great way to buy something you love and support the Figge. Make a donation today and help us reach our goal of $15,000. Your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $5,000, thanks to the generosity of Thomas K. and Jennifer Figge. Show your support for local arts and amazing community partners. All proceeds support the Figge's art and education programs, enabling us to bring art and people together at a time when our community needs it most. Go to www.figgeartmuseum.org and follow us on social media to be part of the fun. Take care, everyone.